Good evening. I am Lacy Rice Jr. of the Greater Hardin County Women's Network, welcoming you to the 2022 Hardin County Political Candidates Forum Series, co-sponsored by the Greater Hardin County Women's Network and the Hardin County branch of the NAACP. Today, our candidates are running for District 9, Division 3 Circuit Court Judge. Joining us are Larry Ashlock and Eric Carr. Today's format will be a 2-minute opening statement followed by 8 questions. The candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. To conclude, each candidate has 1 minute to summarize. Tonight's timekeeper is Lenora Young, representing the Hardin County branch of the NAACP. We conducted a coin flip earlier to determine who will go first. The first question or first opportunity will go to Mr. Ashlock with his opening statement.
Thank you, Lacy. Thank you to the Greater Hardin County Women's Network and the Hardin County branch at NAACP. My name is Larry Ashlock. I'm a candidate for Circuit Judge, 3rd Division. A little bit about myself. I'm 48 years of age. I currently own and operate my own law firm here at 3006 West Dixie Avenue, where I'm coming from this evening, Ashlock Law Group. I'm a 1992 graduate of Central Hardin High School. After graduating Central Hardin, I had the ability to go to local or nearby Campbellsville University. I graduated there in 1997. Then was able to go to Lexington, to the University of Kentucky College of Law, where I got my law degree in 2000. I've got 2 children. Garrett, 21, he's at University of Michigan, and my daughter, Kendall, is a senior at Central Hardin High School here in E-Town, or Cecilia. I've previously held elected office. I was on Elizabethtown City Council, elected twice in 2008 and 2010. Like I said, I'm a Hardin County native. Tell everybody I was born at Hardin Memorial and raised in Eastview. I've practiced here in my hometown for going on almost 22 years now. I tell people I enjoy, one of the reasons I'm running, I enjoy the law, and I enjoy learning about the law and using my legal knowledge, and being a judge is an important position in being part of my community, which is my home. I've been a prosecutor in my career. I've been assistant Hardin County attorney. I've been assistant Commonwealth attorney. So I've sent people to prison and jail. I believe I've handled nearly every type of case that will come before circuit judge. Now, also in being a prosecutor, I've done criminal defense. So I've represented individuals on the other side. I've also handled complex civil litigation cases, contract disputes, real estate, employment, insurance, and I look forward to giving you a little bit more of insight about myself this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, 2-minute opening.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rice and Ms. Young, for having us here this evening. It is absolutely my pleasure to meet with you all and tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Raymond Eric Carr. Everybody just calls me Eric. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Indiana, mostly farming and construction work, and went into the Army right after college, or right after high school. Got out, went to college, became a police officer, got married, and my wife is actually an Army doctor, and so we came here to Fort Knox in 2006, and after 3 years here, it was time for us to, she had enough time in and rank that she could pick anywhere in the world that we wanted to go next. And, over that 3-year period, I had begun working in Hardin Circuit Court as a staff attorney to Judges Howard and Easton, and got to make relationships and found that I was surrounded by wonderful people in this community. And she found out the same thing working at Ireland Hospital, that She loved the community, loved the people that we were working with. And so we chose to make this our home. After her last deployment and choosing it's time to either, are we going to have children or not? Where are we going to raise our kids? It's time for her to get out. We chose, again, we are going to stay here and make Hardin County our home. And this is where we chose to raise our children. Have Ellie and Emma. They are 8 and 11 years old. My wife, Barb, and I, we've been married. We just had our 20th wedding anniversary last week. I cannot believe she's put up with me that long, but so that's where I came from. I've been a prosecutor serving to protect Hardin County since 2009, and I've worked in the criminal trials, working with probation and parole, and working with our treatment courts. Based on that record, I think I have the right experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, please describe your judicial or legal experience more in depth in 2 minutes.
My legal experience, more specifically related to the judicial function, 80 to 90% of the casework for a judge in Hardin Circuit Court is criminal cases, jury trials, overseeing our treatment courts, managing folks who are on probation and parole, making decisions about sentencing recommendations, and with probation and parole, reviewing folks who have had violations or issues while they're on parole, making decisions about how we deal with those issues. My experience since 2009 has been making those recommendations to the court. And so I have a very deep understanding of what kind of things a judge should be looking at and whether or not to approve a sentencing recommendation. Folks who are on some kind of supervision and mess up, there's black and white law, and I'm sure both of us would stand up here and say, we're going to follow that law. The difference is I have the experience in those gray areas where a judge is making a judgment call after looking at the circumstances of each individual who comes before him. Is this somebody who we need to be afraid of because they're going to hurt somebody and we need to send them to prison? Is this somebody who has made some pretty serious mistakes, but there are things that we can do to help them address, whatever substance abuse issue or trauma it was at the root of these problems that caused this person to behave this way. So those are judicial issues. And I have almost 14 years of experience making recommendations on those types of issues and dealing with the courts and the treatment staff and learning about what you really need to look at to come up with appropriate decisions in those cases. So that's my judicial experience, my legal experience related to the judicial function.
Okay. Mr. Ashlock, 2 minutes. Please describe your judicial or legal experience more in depth.
Well, I don't have any judicial experience yet. So my legal experience, again, going back to my graduating from University of Kentucky College of Law 22 years ago. I've been in legal practice now for 22 years. Like I said, I've been a prosecutor, so I've had jury trials where we've sent people to prison, but I've also done criminal defense, and not only criminal defense, but I've been in civil cases where we've had to deal with issues that are going to come up in circuit court. There's no doubt about it that the circuit court hears criminal cases, but they also hear civil cases. Not only do they hear civil cases, but when you're in practice on your own, you get to see what I would call the real people that come through the system, whether it's I'm representing someone's family member, or I'm representing them in a criminal situation. It's usually the worst situation in their life. Same thing with most civil issues. It's usually the worst situation in their life. And I just go back to the old saying, in order to judge a person, you have to understand them. And I think that I understand this community by being in it for 48 years. Not only that, I understand this community by representing hundreds, literally hundreds and probably thousands of individuals in this community, whether it's doing the wills for them, representing them in criminal cases, representing them in civil cases, and in some of the worst times of their life. So I think I have a good understanding of what it takes to judge a person, not only if they're a witness in a case, but if they're sitting in front of me and I have to judge them whether to send them to prison or not.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, describe the duties of a Kentucky Circuit Court judge.
The duties of a Kentucky Circuit Court judge. Well, Circuit Court judge, if either Eric or I are elected, we serve for an 8-year term. And during that 8 years, we will hear mainly 2 types of cases. Those are going to be any felony criminal cases and civil cases. What I like to call big civil cases. Specifically, it's any civil case that the matter in litigation is over $5,000. It also includes all land disputes and foreclosures, no matter how much. So if a person is getting foreclosed upon by their bank, the bank has to go to circuit court. Contested probate issues. So if there's a fight over a will or how a probate case is going, that gets in circuit court. And again, the felony cases, it's going to be any felony. So it's any criminal offense that's punishable by a year or more in state prison, and also includes capital offenses. The type of civil cases you hear, it's going to be contract, dispute, things of that nature.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that. I forgot that these were a minute.
Hard, same question.
Yes, sir. Well, Larry pretty well summed it up there. There's only one answer to that question, really. As I said before, 80–90% of the work is felony criminal case work. To give you an example, the court spends 3 days a week hearing criminal cases. The court spends 1 hour a week hearing civil cases, unless a trial comes up. I have not seen anywhere near the number of civil cases coming before the court for jury trial as criminal. I spent last week, I put in 80 hours at the office last week on a jury trial for armed robbery. I've had 2 murder trials in the last 6 weeks. There has been other people in our office, multiple trials all year long. There's been a single civil case come to trial. So, and I did work on those civil issues when I was a staff attorney and a little bit in private practice before going to work as a clerk. So,
thank you. Mr. Carr, what is the most important challenge facing the court?
In particular for Hardin Circuit Court, one of the biggest challenges we face is not a lack of resources, but a lack of manpower, really. When I became a prosecutor in 2009, we did 500 felony cases. This year, we're going to do about 1,400. We have the same number of judges. We have the same number of clerks. In the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, we have, up until almost 1 month ago, the same amount of attorneys. We just hired a new prosecutor. Learning how to become more efficient and move cases and work hard, that's what has been one of the biggest challenges facing Hardin Circuit Court in particular.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, same question.
I think it's going to be challenging. Two things. One is something we can deal with pretty easily, and that's getting technology involved into the court system. I'm 48 years old. I didn't know what Zoom was 2.5–3 years ago. but I do know that technology saves time and saves resources, and I would like to continue to implement Zoom, Microsoft, Google into the court system. Second, we got to figure out what's going on with the courthouse. If folks have seen recently, we're the only courthouse now that it seems like no one wants. The city of Elizabethtown started the courthouse with a bond. They don't want it because it was falling apart. The county government doesn't want it because it is falling apart. And as a judge that's going to be down there, I've already been speaking with the judges in regards to some of the construction and maintaining issues. So I think going forward, we're going to have an issue because it's the only courthouse that now is completely owned by the state in the whole state of Kentucky. That's got to be addressed.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, what are your views on civil rights violations, and what tools might you use to rule on penalties or judgments?
Well, I think we hear a lot, if you watch the news, whether it's the previous president or issues associated with what's called due process. Due process is an important part of our constitutional structure. But I think sometimes due process gets used when people just simply don't like things. But everyone that comes to court deserves due process. Now, what I mean about that is that the individual who has nothing should be treated the same way as the individual who has everything. And I think that that stretches into every aspect of the way a judge goes about doing their work. Doesn't matter if it's a civil rights case that comes in or it's a defendant sitting in front of you. And I think that I trust that I will give due process to everybody that comes into our court, no matter their station in society.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, the same question.
As regards civil rights issues before the circuit court, if there's a lawsuit over a violation of civil rights or something of that nature, that goes to federal district court. But you know, what was Larry's talking about here, due process, you're talking about things like, was there a probable cause to conduct a stop or to conduct a search, and those kinds of things. Those are the direct things that the circuit court judge would rule on. And so were someone's civil rights violated? Was there a Fourth Amendment issue with the search? Those kinds of things. Was a First Amendment issue with the questioning of a defendant? Those kinds of things. And, you know, as he said, every single individual who comes before this court must be treated fairly, regardless of race, station in life, any of those issues. And it's a very important issue that the judges do deal with all the time, but it's from that aspect of violations of whether or not evidence goes forward and prosecutions go forward and those types of things.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, what place does your political ideology have in courtroom rulings?
Absolutely none. To the extent that I have a political ideology or personal beliefs about, you know, whether it's abortion or the Second Amendment or free speech or what have you, my personal beliefs have absolutely no room whatsoever in a legal ruling. We look to the Constitution. We look to the Constitution of Kentucky. We look to the statutes as enacted by the legislature. You know, there may be things that I think the law should be changed on. It is not my job as a judge to interject my opinion on those matters into what happens before the courtroom.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, same question.
Same answer, none. I've like I said, I've practiced law mostly on my own for the at least past 7 years, and probably for 15 out of the last 20. I've yet to have an individual that has come into my office that have asked me whether I'm a Democrat, Republican, Independent. I've represented every type of individual on the political scale, on the racial. It has not been anything that's ever been an issue with me. And you can rest assured it'll not be something that will enter into my mind any at all whenever I'm making any type of decision with any individual in front of me whatsoever.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, are you an advocate for the death penalty in Kentucky?
As a judge, I'm neither an advocate for or against the death penalty. If a death penalty case is brought in the state of Kentucky, there's a decision by the Commonwealth's attorney, which is the prosecutor, to make that decision that one of 8 factors is involved to bring what's called a death penalty case. What I would say is if a death penalty case is brought in Hardin County during my 8-year term, I will make sure that the veneer, which is called the jury panel, is one that is picked according to, like I said earlier, due process, and that the jury understands the significance of whatever decision that they make. But as far as an advocate, that's not something that a judge gets into advocating for or against the death penalty. It's the law. If individuals want to advocate for or against that, they can take that up with the legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, the same question.
Do I advocate for the death penalty? Was that correct?
Yes, sir. In Kentucky.
Okay. I have very much the same answer. I do not advocate for, even in my position now as a prosecutor, I do not advocate for particular penalties. That is the legislature's function to make those determinations. And my job, either as a judge or even now as a prosecutor, is to follow the law. And I do believe those cases are, fraught with danger. I've had multiple homicides that were eligible for the death penalty. I have not elected to seek the death penalty in any case prior. I can foresee some cases where I might as a prosecutor, but the issues with civil rights, with possible issues with evidence, possible issues with witnesses, possible issues with the jury, it is so important, as we talked about earlier, to ensure that everything is ruled on fairly and passionately, and that the law is followed, the Constitution is followed before we get into those kinds of cases, and most assuredly there. So thank you.
Mr. Carr, what are your views on law enforcement misconduct cases, especially those that result in death or serious injuries?
As a prosecutor, I have been responsible for reviewing a lot of those cases, and we have had issues in Hardin County. Thankfully, nothing like we have seen in other jurisdictions. And it's really hard because grand jury proceedings are by law, by constitutional law, secret. And it leaves a disconnect there with the community sometimes, where they don't get to see the evidence. They don't get to understand what the whole story was. When we review a case and the grand jury says there are no charges here, there are people in the community who will be very passionate about their belief that something more should be done. And we're frankly not able to tell them everything that went into it because of the secrecy of those proceedings.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, same question.
I'm sorry,
Sorry about that. I followed your rule in muting while I was not talking. What was that question again?
Yes. What are your views on law enforcement misconduct cases, especially those that result in death or serious injuries?
My view as a judge is that if those cases are brought before me by the prosecuting attorney, whatever that would be, whether it's a criminal matter or even the case is brought by an individual that suffers injury from what they believe is police misconduct, I will not treat the police officer or a police officer that's not a police officer anymore. I won't treat them any differently than I would the individual on any given case. I don't foresee any circumstance that I would treat any criminal defendant any differently just because they were a police officer or former police officer, or any civil matter any differently than the defendant was a police officer or the county or whomever.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, what are your views on term limits for judicial selections, such as through elections or appointments?
I favor term limits in everything. I favor term limits from the president all the way down to city council, but that's just me, this my own personal feelings. Judges are elected to 8-year terms. Since there was not an appointment in this case, it'll be the full 8-year term. 8 years a long term. I know there's not any limit, and there's some judges that get on there for 30, 40, 50 years. I can tell you that's not going to be me. If I get to serve one term, that may be long enough. I'm not here to be on the circuit court for 30 or 40 years. That's just not who I am. I'm here because I think I have the legal experience that it's needed and the connection with the community. Probably for me, I'll term limit myself to 8 years. I term limited myself when I was on the Elizabethtown City Council to 4 years. There were a lot of people that stayed a lot longer. I'm personally in favor of term limits, but again, that's something I'll leave up to the legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Card, second question.
This being an 8-year term, it's in some shape or fashion self-limiting, I think. I mean, I'll be 50 before January taking office date, and I would personally maybe 2 terms. So judicially, it's pretty self-limiting. Nobody, by the time we get to the age where we have the experience to do this job, it's not very reasonable to stay around for multiple terms. Yeah, there are folks who do that. I would be hard pressed to say that I'm for taking the decision out of the hands of the people. I see people who are in office that have stayed way too long, in my personal opinion, but I would have a hard time taking that decision out of the hands of the people.
Great, thank you. Mr. Carr, you have 1 minute to summarize.
Well, I guess I would sum it up by saying this. I've run on this kind of platform of experience that matters. And my experience and my love for Hardin County are why I am running for this job. Judge Easton moving up to the Court of Appeals is leaving a big void in our criminal justice system in this county. And I have worked in civil cases. I do have some civil and family law experience before I came here to work with the current judges as their staff attorney. I've learned from them over the many years what work it really takes to do this job. I have a vast amount of trial experience with the treatment courts, which, by the way, we have to volunteer, and I will absolutely commit to volunteering to implement those programs. So I believe I have the experience that matters, that's pertinent to doing this job well, and I hope folks will vote for me in November. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Ashlock, 1 minute to summarize. Mr. Ashlock, you're on mute again.
So that's what you get when you're my age and you're not used to this technology. Sorry about that. I was just saying my practice has given me the opportunity to travel the state and practice cases in literally over half Kentucky's 120 counties. So I've seen a lot of judges do a lot of things. I've also practiced in all the federal courts. I've handled cases all the way to the Kentucky Court of Appeals and Kentucky Supreme Court. And so I've seen a lot. And, you know, judges hear and make rulings in cases between parties following the rule of law and not pursuant to any politics or any political persuasion. And judges don't get to pick and choose which cases they come before them. I guarantee that my promise is that no matter the type of case and no matter the parties in the case, I will be a judge that is impartial, decisive, and fair, no matter your politics, your pocketbook, or your political persuasion. In honor, before November the 8th, I would ask for your vote for Hardin County Circuit Judge, 3rd Division. Thank you.
Thank you. We thank each candidate for participating. We ask that you, the voter, consider what the candidate said today before making a decision. Do not vote simply because you know someone or because someone refers a candidate to you. Use the information presented to make an informed choice. Thank you for watching, and on behalf of the Greater Hardin County Women's Network and the Hardin County branch of the NAACP, have a blessed week.